All right, I want to address a post, I think, from last week. Eric Balakunis from Bloomberg was talking about the difference between ETFs and tokenizations, and a panel he was on where they talked about whether more assets will be tokenized or funds will be tokenized and that will replace ETFs. And I wanted to obviously address this. Look, here's the thing. They are not mutually exclusive. What we will see, and what we have already seen, is tokenized versions of ETFs. That does not make, this is very, very important, that does not make the ETFs volatile crypto assets. All it does when you tokenize an asset is you put it in a format that it is able to be held and moved around via public blockchains. It does not really change anything structurally. So what we're going to have, what we can have right now, honestly, and what we're going to have in the future is the ETF. The idea of the regulation surrounding an ETF may not change, right? You're going to have to go through the, whatever the SEC process is, which unfortunately we all know now ad nauseum, the SEC process for creating and marketing the ETF, right? So the ETF is a fund that is traded and it's still going to be managed. Now, what's going to happen is currently ETFs, when you go buy one in your brokerage account, what your custodian, Schwab or Fidelity or whomever, is obviously going to own a whole bunch of those ETFs and then allow you and me and whomever to trade them and kind of technically make an accounting entry that I own that ETF. And what's likely to happen, we're seeing it now with the Texas Stock Exchange, which might or might not be built on a public blockchain. We've already seen NASDAQ talking about moving to blockchain technology. So if assets are stored and moved around via public blockchains, then all ETFs will eventually be tokens. All stocks will eventually be tokens. And the token is just a denomination. It's just an electronic format that allows us to move that asset, to store that asset, to view it, and to move it around. So again, you're going to create the ETF, and then that ETF is going to be denoted as a token. So you might have the S&P, an S&P 500 ETF token, and that token is going to be denoted on some sort of blockchain. So let's say it's on Ethereum. It's going to be such that I can own this S&P fund by virtue. I can own it potentially in my wallet, in my personal wallet. I can own it potentially because it is custodied with a crypto custodian, or eventually all custodians will just hold assets on public blockchains. Again, they are not mutually exclusive. The tokenization aspect of all assets is likely to bring more efficiency. It's definitely going to bring us more thoughts around self-custody. It's going to bring more ideas around utilizing those funds as collateral if I want to utilize those, and it's going to bring more transparency, because if an ETF is tokenized, I might have better visibility into what's happening within those ETFs, especially kind of active, more active ETFs. I'm going to have better visibility into what's happening there, and I am likely to be able to move those funds from whatever custodian they're on to maybe my own private wallet, maybe my own hard wallet. Maybe I can move custodians if I want to. I get to decide more control. Again, it doesn't change the structure of what an exchange traded fund is. All it does is it changes how I'm going to hold it. Now, what I think will happen in the future is I don't think we're going to have the same rules and regulations around ETFs and say, look, go through this long, arduous process with the SEC, and then someone can go ahead and tokenize the fund. I think that's going to be interim steps. But I think eventually, if we really think about what an ETF, we think about all registration with the SEC, right? It's basically the SEC saying, you need to tell us about yourself, whether that is an IPO for a company, or whether it is a fund like an ETF. You need to tell us about it, and we need to investigate. And what are we investigating? What are we looking into? We are looking into how you are using your funds, We are looking into what kind of liquidity there is going to be, and we are going to make sure that you are reporting adequately to those that are investors, because our job as the SEC is to make sure that no one's getting duped, to make sure no one's getting tricked, to protect investors. Right now they do it in terms of publicly traded stocks by quarterly reports, quarterly earnings, which is really not that much of a level of transparency. So eventually what I think we get is a combination of something like SEC type registration rules, again, whether they're for ETFs or for publicly traded companies, that is probably a not quite as much of a process. But I think what we're going to have is the SEC, by virtue of whatever rules kind of Congress puts in place, the SEC is going to say, here are the rules for creating an ETF or going public. And part of the rules involve transparency, and part of them involve liquidity, and there are going to be other rules like who can own, things like that. And what we're going to do eventually, I think, is all of this is going to get wrapped into smart contracts, which is what a token is a smart contract. And there's going to be certain SEC approved smart contract language such that investors are going to get that level of transparency that they need. They're going to get that level of liquidity. They're going to get who can own. It can be traded on certain exchanges, right? We can write all that into the token. So eventually all of this is going to be programmed into a smart contract, and part of what the SEC is going to do is it's going to audit the smart contracts before they can be released on any sort of exchange. They're going to audit it, make sure all these parts are hit, because they're going to have essentially a set of code that says you have to hit these levels of code. Maybe you have to use our protocol for smart contracts, and if you do that and we audit it and you're good, then we're going to let you release the token, and that token can represent a company, it can represent an ETF, it can represent whatever kind of asset. That's the direction I think we're going to go. But all this comes back to the fact that there isn't going to be an either or ETFs or tokens. It's going to be the same thing. The ETF is essentially just a protocol, right? It's just a protocol that says, here's what you have to do going through the SEC and getting approved. Here's exactly what you have to do so that we will allow you to launch this on the American people in this case. So now, all you do is you take that protocol and you say, okay, we're going to make it available in this new kind of custody that blockchain technology gives us, which is I can own it on my own wallet, I can own it on a with a crypto custodian. The SEC might even say, look, we're not going to allow you to own these ETFs in your own wallet. You can only hold them on certain exchanges that we deem are qualified exchanges or qualified custodians. You can only hold them that way. That might be some of the rules they put in place. So the smart contract won't even allow me to transfer it outside of this other custodian. They can write those rules. But again, the SEC's ETF rules and regulations are simply a protocol, and we can put that protocol into code such that it becomes a smart contract. So it isn't mutually exclusive. It's taking the rules that the SEC has for ETFs and then applying them to another way to denote and prove those assets. So there's no winning that debate, will there be ETFs or tokenization? They aren't mutually exclusive. They will work together eventually, and the likes of BlackRock and Franklin Templeton and all these other large companies that are tokenizing assets, they are doing it for greater efficiency. They are doing it so assets are more interchangeable, so they can move around better, so they can track them better, so they don't have to be beholden to these large data centers. They don't have to be beholden to Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or something. They can utilize the power of public blockchains to store that data, to process the transactions, and then the likes of BlackRock and Franklin Templeton can just work on creating and managing those funds. So I wanted to address that with Eric. I hope that makes sense. I hope that we continue to progress and have these conversations around the regulated financial assets and tokenization. Again, they're not mutually exclusive. One is just a way to denote and hold assets. The other is a set of rules and regulations to keep investors safe.